Probable cause, find the defendant, Diana Jean Lovejoy, guilty of the crime of attempted murder. K. McDavid, guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
Hang on. All right, we're going to need to take a break. You're down. And if we could have the jury.
We know that going to prison is a tough pill to swallow. Some female convicts couldn't handle the news of their life sentence and lost control of their emotions in court. In this video, we'll be counting down the top 6 most intense reactions of female convicts who were given a life sentence. From outbursts of rage and despair to collapsing on the ground, these women left a lasting impression on the courtroom and the world. So grab some popcorn and get ready for an emotional roller coaster as we dive into the dramatic reactions of these female convicts. Also, if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest videos. So let's get into it. At number 6, Diana Lovejoy was a woman from Carlsbad in San Diego who was arrested for a plot to kill her estranged husband, Greg Mulvihill. Along with her accomplice, Weldon McDavid Jr., they conspired to kill Mulvihill, who was in the middle of a bitter divorce battle with his wife. Mulvihill survived the murder attempt, but Diana was still sentenced to 26 years to life in prison for her crime. However, when the guilty verdict was read out in court, Diana freaked out so hard that she fainted. The moment was caught on camera and shows Diana sitting in court looking nervous as the verdict is read. As soon as the judge pronounces her guilty, Diana's head drops and she collapses.
Plaintiff versus Weldon K. McDavid, defendant. Case number SCN 363925, DA number OCD 980. Verdict. We, the jury, in the above entitled cause, find the defendant, Weldon K. McDavid, guilty of the crime of conspiracy to commit murder.
She was taken away from court in a stretcher. It's clear that the weight of the situation finally hit Diana, and the reality of the consequences of her actions became all too real. It's not surprising that receiving a life sentence would cause a person to freak out, but Diana's reaction was particularly dramatic, and it's easy to see why it earned a spot on our list of top 10 female convicts who freaked out after receiving a life sentence. Next up at number 5, we have Alexandria Thomas, a young woman who found herself in a difficult situation after being accused of stabbing her boyfriend to death outside a supermarket in Palm Beach, Florida. During a hearing at the Palm Beach County Jail, Alexandria and her mother broke down, overcome with emotion.
Alexandria Thomas crying hysterically there. Her mother was at the podium talking to the court. She fell to her knees in tears.
The incident occurred when Alexandria and her boyfriend got into an argument outside the supermarket. The argument turned physical, and Alexandria allegedly used a knife to stab her boyfriend multiple times. The victim was taken to the hospital, where he was placed in a medically induced coma due to the severity of his injuries. Alexandria was arrested and charged with murder. It wasn't until Alexandria learned that her boyfriend was in a medically induced coma that she realized the seriousness of the charges against her. She was devastated by the realization that her actions had led to the potential loss of a human life. As the legal process moved forward, Alexandria was faced with the prospect of spending many years in prison. She was charged with second-degree murder, which carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole in Florida.
Well, an emotional first appearance, the suspect and her mother breaking down in court when they found out just how serious these charges are.
He's in a medically induced coma right now because of the seriousness of his injuries.
Throughout the trial, Alexandria maintained her innocence, claiming that she had acted in self-defense. However, the prosecution argued that her actions were premeditated and that she had intended to kill her boyfriend. After a lengthy trial, Alexandria was ultimately found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison. The case was a tragic reminder of the consequences of violence and the importance of seeking help and finding healthier ways to resolve conflicts. At number 4, we have Kyandria Cook. Kyandria Cook's outburst during her sentencing made headlines across the country. Cook was involved in an elaborate dating app plot that ended in the shooting of another teenager. She was sentenced to 20 years for her role in the crime.
20 years in state prison. Concurrent as to the first 2 counts.
The crying you hear is coming from Cook's mother. The sentence much more severe than they expected.
Charges charges. All fines and costs.
As the judge read out Cook's sentence, her mother broke down in tears, screaming and crying uncontrollably. This seemed to trigger Cook, who also began to scream and lash out in the courtroom. She could be heard yelling, "I'm sorry" and "I love you" to her mother as she was dragged out of the courtroom by deputies. The video of the outburst quickly went viral, with many people commenting on the emotional nature of the sentencing and the impact it had on both Cook and her mother. Some people criticized the judge for not allowing Cook to speak before her sentencing, while others sympathized with the difficult situation that both Cook and her family found themselves in. Regardless of one's perspective on the case, Cook's outburst serves as a reminder of the emotional toll that sentencing and criminal justice proceedings can take on individuals and families. Moving on to number 3, we have Michelle Blair. Michelle Blair's case is a tragic and disturbing one. In 2015, the bodies of her 2 children, 13-year-old Stoney Blair and 9-year-old Stephen Barry, were found in a deep freezer in her Detroit home. The 2 children had been beaten to death, and their bodies were stored in the freezer for years. Blair was arrested and charged with murder, and during her trial, she had several outbursts and breakdowns.
You lived well without seeing them throughout their whole life, so live well now. But you ain't got nothing to say to me for what I did for my child, period.
In one instance, during a custody hearing for her 2 surviving children, Blair screamed that she did kill her daughter Stoney. She got very irate and had to be restrained by the court officers. Blair's case gained national attention and sparked outrage across the country. The tragedy of the situation, combined with Blair's outbursts and breakdowns, made for a disturbing and emotional trial. Ultimately, Blair was sentenced to life in prison without parole for the murders of her 2 children.
To take responsibility of it. You're therefore sentenced to the Michigan Department of Corrections for the rest of your life without the possibility of parole, meaning, of course, that you will never get out.
Her case serves as a stark reminder of the importance of recognizing and addressing mental health issues in our society. Moving on to number 2 on our list, we have Patricia Krenwinkel. Her reaction in court during her sentencing for 7 counts of first-degree murder was a vivid display of her overwhelming emotions. As a member of the Manson family, Krenwinkel was involved in several heinous murders that shocked the world in the 1960s. The extent of her involvement in these crimes had finally caught up to her, and she was facing the possibility of life in prison. In the courtroom, Krenwinkel was seen sobbing uncontrollably, and her body convulsed with the intensity of her emotions. She repeatedly banged her head against the wall as she wept in despair. Her outburst was a reminder of the devastating impact that these crimes can have, not just on the victims and their families, but also on the perpetrators themselves. Krenwinkel's reaction was also a reflection of the deep-seated emotions that had been festering within her for years. She had been a loyal follower of Charles Manson and had been brainwashed into believing his twisted ideology. Her involvement in the Manson family's crimes had left her emotionally scarred, and her outburst in court was a manifestation of her pain and regret. Despite her emotional outburst, Krenwinkel was ultimately sentenced to life in prison. Her reaction in court was a haunting reminder of the tragic consequences of violent crime and the toll it takes on all those involved. Finally, at number 1 on our list, we have the case that received widespread attention as it highlighted issues of police brutality, racial profiling, and the use of excessive force by law enforcement. Geiger claimed that she had entered Gene's apartment by mistake, mistaking it for her own, and had shot him because she believed he was an intruder. Many people criticized the sentence, arguing that 10 years was not enough for taking the life of an innocent man. Some pointed out that if the roles were reversed and a black person had entered a white police officer's apartment and shot them, they would likely receive a much harsher sentence. Despite the controversy surrounding her sentence, Geiger's emotional outburst in court is a reminder of the devastating impact that crimes can have on both the victim's family and the perpetrator. It also highlights the need for accountability and justice in cases of police brutality and excessive use of force. Well, that's a wrap on the top 6 female convicts who freaked out after being given a life sentence. We hope you enjoyed watching these emotional outbursts in court as much as we did. As you've seen, these cases are a stark reminder of the consequences of criminal behavior and the importance of upholding the law. So what did you think of our list? Did we miss any other notable cases? Let us know in the comments below. And hey, while you're down there, tell us what you would most likely go to jail for if you were ever to find yourself on the wrong side of the law. Thanks again for watching, and we'll catch you next time.